Hello, it's me, Kezia Noble. Today's show, as you can see, is in a different studio. That's because the studio we usually use is having a little bit of a refurb. Okay, glad that's all cleared up. Today's guest is Ben Habib. Ben Habib is the leader of Advance UK. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Kezia.
Good
Lovely to
morning.
be here.
How's it going? How many members do you have now?
Well, we're just shy of 37,000 members,
Mm-hmm.
um, which we've achieved since the 30th of June. So in, what is that? July, August, September, just over 3 months, we've gone to 37,000 members, which makes us the seventh largest political party by membership in the United Kingdom. I think the next largest party is the Scottish National Party. So we've done really well. By that measure, we've done phenomenally well.
Are you happy with those numbers?
I'm very happy with the progress we've made to date, but of course we've got one hell of a challenge ahead of us. We've got to put ourselves on the map in time for the general election in 2029, assuming it takes place in 2029, and we're a brand new entity. So yes, it's a fantastic and very promising start. I think there's a lot of traction out there. I think there's a recognition broadly in the electorate that there isn't a political party that genuinely stands for this country and has the capability to deliver it to safety. And they are looking for something new. And I believe Advance UK will be that party. But the challenge is to make the electorate aware that we exist. So 37,000 members is a great start, but we've still got a mountain to climb.
Well, congratulations. Let me tell you my story and where I'm coming from to give some context to this interview. So in 2024, I voted for Reform UK. And it was for the reasons most people voted Reform, which is high immigration.
Yeah.
I met the MPs. I met Nigel Farage. I met Richard Tice when I was invited to the House of Parliament. And I liked them. I liked them all. I found especially Richard Tice to be very charismatic. They were all like having, jokes amongst each other. They were just so different to the other politicians. And I was like, this is great. It's like when I meet other politicians, they're very watered down. They're very careful of what they say, they're sort of micromanaging everything. It just feels very off. But with them, there was like great bants and stuff. I met Rupert Lowe there, loved what they had to say, even privately when I was speaking to them. And it was all well and good. And then you went. And I was like, oh. And I was like, okay, right. Let's carry on with this. And then Rupert Lowe went. And I was just like, on top of that, all these conservative MPs.
What, joining Reform, you mean?
Yeah, joining Reform. They weren't characters like you and Rupert Lowe, and something gone. And I just said, right, I need to think about voting for someone else now. Okay. Then, and as I said to you before, I was on GB News quite regularly. So I was, speaking to lots of people there, getting their perspective on it. But something else happened. This is what made me change course, okay? For some reason, this year, we're still in 2025, I went on a lot of holidays, okay? And I went to those hellscape resorts, the ones full of families. Right, they're hellscapes. But when you've got kids, they're perfect.
Yeah.
And you end up becoming friends with these people because you're there for like 2 weeks and you're talking to them at the buffet every night. And people are drinking, people start opening up, and politics starts coming up.
Yeah.
And
dangerous.
But everyone was saying to me, I'm voting Reform. Now, these were middle-class people, working class, upper middle, lower working. Every sort of person was at these resorts. And a few of them said they're going to vote for Conservative. And when I spoke to the ones who were voting for Reform, and I mentioned, but what do you think about Ben Habib leaving and Rupert Lowe? They went, who? No, I don't mean that in any offense to you, but
fine.
Then I realised, hold on, there is a world outside GB News and Twitter or X. There's this whole big world because most people are not following politics the way that you and I follow politics.
No.
They heard of Nigel Farage. That's it. They don't know Richard Tice's even. They know Nigel Farage. That's all. They like what Reform have to say. They change the channel and they carry on watching Match of the Day. And that's it. They've made their decision. And that's when I became a member of the Reform Party. I said, look, we've just got to get this uni party out. No, they shouldn't have lost you. They shouldn't have lost Rupert Lowe. No party is perfect. But my goodness, reform are going to be much better than what we currently have. Would you agree with that statement? And I know you've been asked this before, do you feel like, even though I understand where you're coming from, it's coming from a good place, I'd probably do the exact same thing as you and start up my own party if that had happened to me. But just like long game here, do you not think that that's going to split some of the vote and stop reform coming in?
So I think reform doesn't offer any new solutions to the country. Farage doesn't have a political philosophy. That's pretty clear. For example, in November 2024, he was on with Steve Edgington, a GB News presenter, and he said that it was impossible to deport all illegal migrants and that he had no ambition to do it. And then a few weeks ago, I think largely because of pressure brought by my existence and perhaps, what others were saying, he pivoted around and said, actually, he does believe in mass deportations and he's going to deport all illegal migrants. That's a 180-degree change.
So is your party sort of holding them to account? Is that its role?
Yeah, no, that's certainly not the role of the party. But I'm just evidencing that Farage doesn't have a political philosophy. And I mean, you mentioned it yourself. He's taking into his bosom, if you like, for want of a better description, he's taking in lots of failed Tory MPs.
I think he knows what he's doing, though. He's a clever man. So he might be doing this because, as I said, we're going, like, if we take ourselves out of, the world of Twitter, the world of X and GB News, most people, they won't even know that. They will see like, oh, that's great.
Sure, but
Conservative MPs are going over to Nigel Farage. That looks good. He knows what he's doing, Nigel.
Why does that look good, Kezia? Why does it look good? That
not for maybe you and me, but
no.
Average people are going to look and say, oh, the Conservatives have woken up and they're going to reform now. Hooray. That's what the average person thinks.
Yeah, so there are two aspects to government. The first is getting elected. And Farage may be very good at campaigning. I don't dispute that. He's perhaps one of the best campaigners ever. But then you have to deliver for the country. And the country is facing, it's not just immigration, the country is facing challenges at every single level. Culturally, constitutionally,
but 80% of it is down to immigration, in my opinion.
Culturally, constitutionally, economically. Immigration is at the heart of many things. But if you look at every category of our existence, if you like, we are challenged as a country. So you've got to get elected, but then you've got to have a political philosophy and the policies and the people who are capable of delivering those policies that will save the United Kingdom. The whole exercise of getting rid of the unit party will be a waste of time if you take office and you can't deliver for the United Kingdom.
He's not perfect, I said that, but he's the only reform, the only ones that have any real, have any real chance of getting in. Because
he will be a disaster in government.
I don't agree.
He will be a disaster in government because he has no political philosophy.
He's been consistent for years about immigration. He's been banging that drum before anyone else was.
Kezia, I just told you, in November 2024, he said mass deportations wasn't even an ambition of his. And then a few weeks ago, he was in favor of mass deportations. A year ago...
That's good. That's good. He's now in favor of mass deportations.
Yeah, but you just said that he's been consistent on immigration. He hasn't.
Well, he was about stopping the boats and stopping people coming in.
He hasn't been consistent. It's absolutely vital.
Mass deportations is something that's just come up in the conversation in the last year or so.
Deporting people who've come to this country illegally is the cornerstone. It must be the cornerstone of any policy to deal with illegal migration.
I agree.
And he couldn't get that as recently as November 2024. Why, Kezia, would he wish to appeal to the liberal side of the Tories?
Just to get into power. And then once he's in power, he can implement all the things that reform voters like me want. But
you'd get power.
He's not perfect. It's not a perfect...
Kezia,
there is no perfect party.
Basically, what you're trying to justify is that he's lying in order to gain popularity and support, but actually he will then be different when he's in government. Basically, what you're advocating is that we should support a liar, someone who's misrepresenting his position.
No, he's not a liar.
Well, that's what you're saying.
You said he's changed his mind.
You're saying that he is saying
But maybe he didn't at that point think that mass deportations was a possibility. Now he's saying he will do it.
If he didn't get in November 2024 that the deportation of every single illegal migrant was a prerequisite to dealing with immigration and the country's problems, then he simply isn't the right man for the job. There's no point him coming round to it now. And by the way, even the policy he came out with a few weeks ago, he said, everyone who's here illegally will be deported. The next morning, again, challenged by the liberal press, to which you were, the sort of liberal side of the equation to which you were referring, he said, well, actually, I'm going to exclude women and children. And he held his own policy below the waterline. Because the minute you exclude women and children, what you're basically signaling is two things. First, women and children coming across the channel will not be deported. So more and
more
women...
There are no women and children coming across the channel.
There are some, but you would encourage more women and children to come and less single men. The other thing you would do is give men 4 years' notice that they should get married, have children in this country, because no court is going to separate a father from his family.
I understood. And I think so that you've raised some good points. But
then the other thing he said, and I just need to say this, and people need to know he's not the answer. In the same interview, he said that the European Convention of Human Rights, in order to deport people from Great Britain, the European Convention of Human Rights would be removed from Great Britain, but not from Northern Ireland. He would leave the ECHR in place in Northern Ireland. And effectively what that would mean is that any illegal migrant in the United Kingdom wishing to avoid deportation would go straight to Northern Ireland. And he again undermined his own policy. So this is a man who just a few weeks, he's made his career, I agree, Kezia, he's made his career on opposing immigration. A year ago, he wasn't for mass deportation of illegal people. Then a few weeks,
he is.
And now he is. And then he came out with a policy which absolutely holds itself below the waterline. His policy for deportation does not work.
Okay.
So he's not
competent. Can we
competent.
go back to my original point, which is, I cannot have Labour or Conservative in charge. I know you don't see the difference between them and Reform, but I see the difference. And we're going to be, the people who are voting in Reform are going to hold them to account.
Let me just tell you what happens. You get a Farage government and he screws up in the way he's going to screw up. It's a dead cert that he will screw up.
It's not a dead cert.
It's
not. We can't have the Uni Party anymore. This country will be destroyed if we have Labour.
This country needs principled politics. One of the main reasons we're in the pickle we're in is because politicians have repeatedly, as you know, promised to reduce immigration, to court popularity, and then not done it. The British people are up in arms. They voted to leave the EU, for example. Successive governments said that they would do it and then didn't do it. It is high time that politicians standing for election made their positions clear to the British people, and so that they get a genuine democratic mandate to do what they promise they're going to do. To say one thing when you're campaigning to get into office and then doing the opposite is what has got this country into the predicament it's in.
I believe that when he gets in, there will be mass deportations. I believe
You're
that.
Suspending reality in the pursuit of hope, and you will be
But
desperately
they're the only
disappointed.
hope. They are the only hope.
They're not the only hope. There is Advance UK.
And I wish you all the best, but when I go to the people outside of the Twitter bubble, they don't know you. And I mean that with all due respect.
We are 3 months old.
Yeah, but you've been around. You know, you've been in the media a lot, and all they know is Nigel Farage, and Reform probably will get in. I don't think Reform's going to make the distance. I actually don't think Reform's going to make... It's like you don't want it to, almost.
No, I think Reform's
better than Labour and Tory.
No, I disagree, Kezia. I think Reform's going to be a disaster for the country.
You're a very stubborn man.
I'm not stubborn. I resigned from Reform because I believe it'll be worse than disaster, because people would have given Reform their hope. Reform carries the hope and aspirations of people like yourself. And you believe that when they get into office, they're going to do great things. And when they disappoint, you will be so disappointed and you will be downtrodden. You will disconnect from the political interaction. You probably won't vote again. Voting numbers are dropping anyway. But more importantly, and this is the thing people really have to take on board, if we get the so-called patriotic government of Reform, and then Reform doesn't deliver, the political commentariat, those whom we stand against, will say, look, you had your chance. Farage was returned as Prime Minister, and look at the mess he's made. I'm sorry, we're going to join the EU. We're going to go back to all the bad old ways that got this country
I
into
believe that won't happen. I believe
Well,
that
good luck with that one.
I believe he'll get in, and I listen to people, and a lot of people are voting reform. A lot.
A lot are.
There
Advanced UK hasn't entered the electorate psyche. But let me just tell you how it works, if I may, Kezia. The way you impact the political fabric of this country is, first of all, it's like concentric circles. You have to start with the people who are very politically engaged, make them aware of your existence, and then it filters out and filters out and filters out. So it's not surprising to me that people on holiday with you didn't know who I was. But by the time...
But they all knew Nigel. They liked him. They liked what he's saying, and they want to stop immigration. That's a good thing. That's good that people are having this conversation.
Can I just finish what I
Sorry,
saying?
Yes, please.
It's not about me or Richard Tice or any other individual. It shouldn't be about Farage. It should be about the message. It should be about the message that the party can deliver for this country, that the collective,
I like the reform
representatives...
message. I approve of it.
But it shouldn't... You've said quite often, Farage is reform. Reform is Farage. Everyone knows Farage.
Not for me, for the average person, not for me.
Yeah.
For me, I'm in that whole world.
But it's deeply dangerous when one man becomes the entity. It's deeply dangerous, apart from anything else. If he were to be hit by a bus, that would be the end of reform. So it's about getting the message out there. And that's the right way to approach it. And it goes out in concentric circles, first by converting people who are politically engaged, and then slowly getting the message to those who are less politically engaged. And Advance is only 3 months old. We've only started this process. And I'm absolutely confident, by the way, that by the time 2028, 2029 comes around, no matter how big the challenge, we would have met it and we would have succeeded. We are going to make the electorate aware that we exist, because we are the party that actually will deliver for this country.
Okay. I said I have 5 questions. Here's my second question for you. So whilst immigration dominates a lot of the conversation and headlines, many believe that the economy and the issue of tax will still be ultimately the determining factor in how people will vote. So which taxes would Advance UK cut or even scrap? And how does it differ from the other main parties?
So it's too early yet to give you a breakdown of our policies.
Corporation tax, that's what I want to know.
Well, our approach will be to slash taxes as much as possible, right across the board. The working and middle classes, small and medium-sized enterprises, corporation tax is critical. We've got to make ourselves competitive from an international perspective. We've also got to cut back welfare dramatically. This country has moved from a country of the creation of wealth to one of redistribution of wealth. We've replaced aspiration with dependency, and these two things have to be reversed back to where we were in the 1980s and 1990s. We've got to get that can-do attitude back into the British workforce and into our economy. And so we will stand against, obviously, increasing taxes, and we will be cutting taxes wherever possible. But it's too early to give you specifics. But we will be targeting taxes that particularly hit working class people, middle class people, SMEs, small businesses, and so on. The key also, people often talk about cutting taxes as the panacea which is going to deliver the economy into sort of growth. But the other thing that any incoming Advance government would do is to deregulate. We forget how highly regulated we are as a country, and we must deregulate so that people can actually carry out their business activities without having the firm knee of the state on their neck all the time.
For me, the final nail in the coffin for the Tory party is when they put up that corporation tax.
Yeah, it's crazy. I agree with you.
That was. I mean, I never vote. Actually, I've never voted Conservative. My family, my family are, true blue. Apart from my grandfather, who's part of the Communist Party. Apart from that, they were all true blue. But all of them, by the way, I know you're going to hate this. Guess who they're voting for?
Well, they're great. But I mean, Advance didn't exist until a few months ago.
And they all like you. Yeah. They all like you. So they all like Rupert Lowe.
They will all be voting Advance. So let me just say...
No, they won't, because they just don't think they have the chance. But we're going back and forth. I do very much approve of your what you're going to be doing if you get into government with the tax system. What's Advanced UK, approach to what some people consider these sort of never-ending foreign wars, in particular Israel and Gaza? Now, I'm asking this because a lot of your voters, followers, are what are considered to be, and I don't like this phrase, the woke right. Okay, I don't like that phrase, but just for context, that's what I'm going to call them. And they pretty much don't want any involvement with Israel, Gaza. This is Israel's problem. Let them sort it out in their own way.
I don't think Israel wants our involvement in that war either.
Well, but most people who vote Reform, are sympathetic to Israel. In general, they're aligned with Israel. So how do you square that circle then?
Square which circle?
Well, the fact that you've got a lot of people who follow you who are going to say, we don't want anything to do with Israel. Britain should stay out of it.
I think if you were to ask Israel what it would like United Kingdom's foreign policy to be towards Palestine and Israel, their response would be, I imagine, just leave us alone to get on with the job. And it's Starmer.
I think they would want their support.
Well, we don't, Israel...
At least just, verbally just show their support.
I mean, I find it extraordinary that people call for sanctions on Israel by the British government, and they're calling for a cessation of arms being exported to Israel. Israel is a much more capable military force than the United Kingdom is. It has much more advanced technology and it's battle hardened. It knows how to fight a war. We don't. We're actually quite soft and haven't really engaged for years. And
correct.
We've got a hollowed out armed forces. As far as the Israel-Palestinian fight is concerned, I'm more concerned about its domestic implications in the United Kingdom. The way that we see these pro-Palestine, anti-Israel marches repeatedly, which reveal to me something deeply wrong in the United Kingdom. Multiculturalism, in the way that we're practicing it, has yielded forces domestically which stand against the United Kingdom. I know many people obviously rightly see the pro-Palestinian marches as a march against Israelis, as a march against Jews, but it's actually a march against Britain. It's a march against the United Kingdom. They hold this country
It's a march against the West. They look at Israel, and Israel represents the West in the Middle East, and they don't like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Sticking on to religion a little bit, so this is the fourth question. You have made it clear that Advance UK would outlaw halal slaughter in this country, correct?
So there are multiculturalism, which has yielded some peculiar collateral results. One of which, for example, is that the majority of meat you now buy in this country is halal.
Yeah.
And I think the reason...
We don't get a choice.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is it's much cheaper to kill animals using halal
It's
methods.
just easier. I know a few people who own restaurants, and they said, yeah, all our meat's halal. I said, why? And they said, it's just because there's so many Muslims that come in here. It's just easier. Most people who are not Muslim don't really care as long as the meat tastes good. They don't care how it was killed.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
It's just tokenism from your
So
side.
I saw, I'll come to the answer, but
Okay.
I saw a menu printed by Kensington Palace for their afternoon tea. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Kensington Palace...
Is it shish kebab?
No, Kensington Palace have an afternoon tea menu, which, has on it all the things you'd expect: cucumber sandwiches, coronation chicken, etc. As various options you can have. And the heading of the menu says everything on this menu is halal. That's Kensington Palace.
Yeah.
So
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
With King Charles in charge.
So the way to deal with halal, the way to deal with the Palestinian marches, the way to deal with multiculturalism gone wrong is to deal with multiculturalism.
Mm-hmm. And we will get to that. That will be my last question.
And banning halal, which is a kind of knee-jerk...
Tokenism.
It's a knee-jerk reaction to the obvious failings of multiculturalism. But the better way to deal with it is to make sure that we have a settled, homogenous, integrated British society which holds traditionally British views, so that halal becomes an unnecessary thing. So Kensington Palace doesn't feel the need to say everything on this menu is halal. Some people say to me, this is tangential but relevant. Some people say to me, Ben, would you support bringing back the death penalty? When you look at the way criminal justice system in this country is failing, would you bring back the death penalty? And my response to that is, look, it's a sign of an advanced society giving up killing people, which, by the way, I think assisted dying is a disaster.
I agree.
But, it's a sign of an advanced society to give up the death penalty. If we bring it back as a knee-jerk reaction to the criminal justice system not failing, what we ourselves are failing to do is to recognize that actually the fault isn't in the punishment. The fault is in the criminal justice system failing in the first place. And what we've got to do is fix our criminal justice system, which in part also turns on fixing multiculturalism. Our criminal justice system is hijacked by multiculturalism. If we can fix that, then we don't need to bring the death penalty back. And so one of the things Advanced UK will try its best to do is reveal the root causes of problems.
Well, for me, it's just the numbers. Look, if there was 500,000 Muslims in Britain, no one would be talking about halal. There'd be no problem. It's the amount that we're importing in now from the Middle East and from North Africa. I think it's to do with numbers. It's because if you think about it, how many Jews are living in
200,000?
So no one really cares if they have their kosher butcher here and there. It doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
But it's the numbers, and that's why I believe that places like Kensington Palace are, putting in halal.
They're hijacked. Yeah. So we've got
It's
to get.
hijacked.
We've got
Because
to get
of the numbers, the demand.
Yeah, we've got to get the culture of this country settled, which involves reducing mass migration.
Well, that's going to be my last
Yeah.
question. But just sticking to this, because this was my second part of that question, which is a lot of people say, well, you should ban halal meat because it's cruel to the animal. I believe in religious freedom in
That's
this
what
country.
Sarah Potchin said when she got up in Parliament.
Did she?
She cited cruelty to animal. And
So-
I think it's more
so-
fundamental than that.
So why not ban male circumcision then? Because that's cruel, isn't it? It's genital mutilation. When does it stop? Do you see what I mean? So if you say, well, the poor animals are being slaughtered, I think that the problem with that is then it starts interfering with what people choose to do with their children on a religious basis. So
Look,
that's Jews also.
As far as I'm concerned, people can practice whichever religion they want to in the United
agree.
Kingdom, but they need to understand that they are in a constitutionally Christian country.
Yes, I agree. I say, look, my son's school, I said, why is there not pork on the menu? I personally don't eat pork, but I'm like, pork should be on the menu. It should be an option. Pork is not served in nearly any state schools now.
Yeah, we're losing touch with who we are, and it's getting worse. One of the things Starmer wishes to do, you might have heard me say, is to remove the bishops from the House of Lords.
Mm-hmm.
And the bishops sitting in the House of Lords signify our Christian constitution. They actually represent Christianity in our houses of power. They are the representation of Christianity in our constitution. And the king, being the head of the Church of England, represents our Christian constitution. And Starmer wants the bishops out of the House of Lords because he wants this to cease to be a Christian country. And I am dismayed.
Why is that? Why?
Because they have an ideological commitment. They're wed to this notion that multiculturalism and all things to all people right across the globe is the best way for government.
But they're placating mostly to Islam and to Muslims. They're not doing this for Hindus or Jews. It feels mainly it's for Muslims.
Well, Islam, if you practice multiculturalism in the way that we practice it in this country, which is to import, as you say, lots of people from different countries, and then we put a protective blanket around them through diversity, equity, and inclusion, and saying, actually, you've got protected characteristics, so we're going to protect you. The most muscular of all the cultures that we import, the most muscular of those cultures is the culture that will dominate, because they're all protected, but as against each other, it's the most muscular one that will dominate.
Yes.
And the most muscular culture, most muscular religion in the world, the most self-confident, proselytizing, outwardly looking religion in the world is Islam.
Yes, it is.
It is the most self-confident religion.
Yes.
Christianity's lost its self-confidence.
Yes, I
It
agree.
withdraws. It doesn't go on its front foot. And one of the things I think an advanced UK government has to do, for me, it's not about attacking Islam, attacking Islam, attacking Islam.
No.
It's about making the case for Christianity and making sure we settle this, reconnect with our Christian roots, constitutionally and culturally, and settle this country so that we become a Christian country again.
But so many people in this country who are cradle Christians, let's put it that way.
What do you mean by cradle Christian?
They're born into a Christian family, but they don't observe it. They're atheist, but they might have been christened at most.
Yeah.
They seem to not really give a stuff about Christianity. So it makes sense why Islam is dominating the narrative.
So,
because
you've hit the nail on the head. What we have in the United Kingdom, what we had, is a very advanced society, politically a very advanced society, a society in which religion existed, but it absented itself from the state completely, and had absented itself from our private lives to the point that actually it almost ceased to exist. So even though we may be, as you describe them, cradle Christians, I'm baptized, but I'm not. I'm really non-practicing. People like me were the problem, because we took our Christianity for granted. We took the Christian roots of this country for granted, and all the benefits it brought us, we took for granted without protecting it. We let other cultures run amok, and we didn't protect the fundamental roots that created such a wonderful country in which we now live. And it's because of its delicate nature that it is now so threatened. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of people who are turning back to Christianity. They're going back to it in this country.
I think if they
the young
don't,
people, especially with Catholicism, I've noticed.
And it would be entirely natural for them to do that.
Because they're rebelling against their parents.
And they're rebelling against the system.
Generation Alpha are starting to push back, saying, we don't agree with this. We don't think it's natural. And I've realised this is them rebelling against, us annoying millennial parents who are just very liberal. They're rebelling against us. And they're turning, so many now are turning to religion and turning back to God. It's fascinating to watch.
It's perfectly natural, I think, for this to be happening.
Cycles. It happens. It's happened all the way through history.
And I hope it continues. We need to reconnect. Your son's a good boy.
I'll tell him you said that.
Yeah.
So my last question, you've been involved in politics for a long while. And
not long, 6 years. I'm new.
Okay,
I'm a newbie.
I thought it was longer than that. And you've been on the inside. We've touched on it, but I really want to get a grasp on this. Why the Western world seems to be actively destroying itself with mass immigration? It doesn't feel like incompetence anymore, or someone's not watching what's going on. And I go down as many rabbit holes as you want with this, because I can't work it out. And I've spoken to lots of people, up until late at night, discussing back and forthing, and no one's coming up with a real conclusion to why this is going on. Some people say, well, it provides cheap labour for the big businesses. Okay, got that. They say, well, it helps inflate house prices having in all these people, because if the housing market collapses, then this country, the British economy, will go into freefall.
It's a very narrow, peculiar
But
reason.
these are the only reasons that someone can give me that makes me go, that makes sense. Everything else is turning to mush as a result of mass immigration. I can see it in Europe. Personal anecdote, I went to Madrid. Have you been there? Madrid?
Not for a while, but I have been there, yeah.
And I went there and I said, this is a beautiful city.
It is a beautiful city.
It was quiet. There was not lots of crowds. It had a lot of space. It was very clean. You felt very safe. Bingo. There was no immigration there. You go to Paris, you go to Amsterdam, you go to London, it's a completely different story. And I said, every time I see, oh my God, that's where I noticed something was going on. So I went in 2006, and then the second time I went there was 2012. And I said, why is everything in Arabic? Now that's what I'm noticing with all these places.
It's happening here too.
It's this Arabic Middle Eastern influence. We are importing people in, men from the Middle East. Riddle me that. Explain to me why are we doing this?
So it is the question you just asked is the salient political question of the day. Why is the West practicing policies which will actually do away with the West? It is the salient question. Do you agree with me that the policies we're practicing will end up in our destruction if they go unchecked?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the salient question, and I've puzzled over it. And I think there are two forces at play. The first force, I think, comes from World War II. And after World War II, there was a recognition amongst all the great states of the world, the protagonists and antagonists of that war, that there needed to be a new global settlement. Otherwise, we'd have another world war. There had to be institutions that prevent wars from happening. And the UN was created. The roots of the EU were sown. The European Convention of Human Rights was established, and various other bodies. And these bodies were put in place so that nation states had a set of fora that they can go to and discuss the issues of the day without going to war. And slowly these organizations became more and more powerful. And the UN, for example, ceased to be a body where lots of nation states could come together and chat and try and understand each other's issues, but became an entity in its own right, with its own political activism, with its own political views. The EU is the best example. The EU went from being a trade arrangement to effectively now wishing to be a supranational state with its own national anthem, with its own armed forces and everything. And as these supranational entities like the UN and the EU got bigger and more powerful and started making policies for their own advancement, as opposed to just allowing member states to do what's right, they established this, what I would call anti-nation state form of globalism. Because for the EU to succeed to the nth degree, actually the EU needs Germany, France, Italy, Greece, etc., not to exist. That the EU's trajectory is at the cost of Germany. If you have powerful
But
European...
you're just focusing, when I said the Western world, I'm talking about Canada,
Yeah.
I'm talking about
So I'm just giving you an
Australia,
example.
all of it.
Yeah. So
What's their excuse?
Yeah. So they're all practicing the same policies of. So if I can just quickly, as dull as this might be, I think it's important.
Please,
Yeah.
it's important.
So these supranational institutions have gone beyond themselves, and they include, the UN includes Canada, Australia. And they all go to the World Economic Forum, and they all chat, and they're all cooperating. And they've forgotten that our politicians have forgotten they represent nation states. They're completely taken over by this globalist order. That's the first thing that's taken place. And of course, if you believe in globalism to the extent that our politicians now do and practice it, your own citizens become irrelevant because you're acting for the good of the citizens of the world.
Yes.
And so mass migration becomes a non-issue. You don't really care because they're people,
Our
other people.
day-to-day life, the quality has been diminished greatly.
They've lost connection with that.
But
And
they
then
must, wait,
Yeah.
I'm just going to challenge you on this. They must have people in their family, relatives that are saying to them, come on, look, this is destroying this country now. I don't think they can't be in this bubble completely because it's so bad now, mass immigration,
the other thing that happens,
it's affecting everybody and everything. I think maybe 20 years ago, you could be in a bubble. I live in Kensington and Chelsea, okay? I was in a bubble. It's in my bubble now. I said this in a video on GB News. I said it's spilling over. So it used to be contained. The migrants used to be contained in certain areas that we could avoid in London. They're everywhere now. They're being housed in Chelsea and Kensington. I can't walk in my local park without being harassed by some unhinged migrant. I can no longer walk in my park. It's unsafe. These bubbles that you're talking about and stuff, they don't exist anymore because it's so bad. That's what I'm trying to say.
The other thing that happens when you go down the path we've gone down is that you obviously have the mass migration that takes place. And then you change...
And the type of what it is Middle Eastern men who are milling around all day in the street. When I go out of London and I go to somewhere like Sussex, you don't see grown men walking around doing nothing. They go for their lunch break and then they go back to work. When I go to London, I just see men standing around, chain smoking. I'm like, wait, what are you doing?
But the other effect
We're importing this.
So the other effect that happens is when you take these people in, we grant them the right to vote. And once they've been granted the right to vote, then the politicians are pandering to their interests because the politicians want to get into parliament. one of the reasons Farage hasn't got the courage to stand up to some constituencies is because he doesn't want to lose favour with them, because he wants to get into office in the way that you described. And so the problem becomes embedded, because
It is
then
embedded, yes,
you're
it's embedded.
seeking the vote and support of people from abroad. And what the people from abroad want is policies made for people from abroad.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing, for example, the reintroduction into mainstream British politics of sectarianism. We're seeing it. We're seeing it in front of our eyes. The Muslim vote is a very
they've
important
hijacked the
vote.
Green Party,
Yeah.
haven't they?
So
Palestine
now,
firsters.
and now the argument that people who've come to this country would make is, well, we have every right to be here just as much as you do. We're British citizens and we're going to vote. So globalism, which gave rise to this mass migration, having embedded it in the country, now it's virtually impossible to reverse it.
How is it sustainable even? How is it sustainable? Because what's happening is most of these people, the ones that do work, are working and also claiming benefits, housing benefits.
Yeah.
So how is this sustainable? And the quality, we're losing wealthy people.
We're going to go
people
bankrupt.
are leaving.
We're going to go bankrupt if we're not careful.
It's like the lunatics are behind the wheel.
They are lunatics.
And I feel like I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a second. I feel that they are purposely trying to lower our expectations. So if you think about when I was growing up in the 1980s, it was completely within our reach to work hard and have a house by the time we were 25. You could be a secretary and own an apartment, at least in London, and then you could settle down and have children. This wasn't like some crazy dream. But now people have realized, okay, it's going to be more in my 40s and it's going to be like a studio flat. So everything, all our expectations, because they feel like we cannot keep up with the expectations of the boomers. So we're going to have to lower everyone's expectations. They'll be happy with living in a box somewhere. We've got so much more distractions now, obviously. So we're not concentrating on what's going on and how awful things are becoming in our lives because we have all these distractions. I've noticed my quality of life would be so much better if we literally had 20-30% less people in this country. I'm just saying.
I agree with you.
People say, oh, you shouldn't moan about parking spaces. Why shouldn't I? When I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, parking was not even a thing. You didn't even think about it. You didn't talk about it. You could get your children into the local school, no problem. You could get a same-day GP appointment. I remember being ill and the school calling up my mother when I was 7 years old, and I was at the doctor's surgery within an hour. There was none of this 8 a.m. rush. You could, as I said, you could leave home at 18, rent yourself a little flat. You could move on with your life. You could meet a partner. People weren't, and that's another thing. A lot of people say, but we need more people because we've got a low birth rate. I blame mass immigration on low birth rates because what's happening is mass immigration is making it more and more unaffordable, housing more and more unaffordable. So what people are doing is they're only able to have one child because the mother has to go out and
Everyone's
work also.
Working, they can't afford to
so
have
there's
children.
this whole thing, like we need more people because we've got a low birth rate.
It doesn't
add up.
No,
because if we had less immigration, women would be able to stay at home. You wouldn't need two people working to pay the rent, to pay the huge high mortgage. None of it makes sense. There's nothing that is good that's come out of this. And if we have this other argument, which is, but we need the care workers. Remember it was fruit pickers, now it's care workers.
And NHS stuff.
NHS. Yeah. It's basically immigrants looking after immigrants at this point now. If we need care workers, fine, let's get them on temporary working visas. Why can't we do that? There's so many solutions to this that are not being, that no one's coming up with. Anyway,
housing is a great example because
it's destroying people's ability to have children. So you just have one child.
Yeah. So one of the things we're going to have at Advance UK is a bonk for Britain policy.
A bonk for Britain policy.
Yeah, making sure that all families can have lots of children and that we reinstitute the family unit, because the family unit has been broken by the forces that you've just described, both parents having to work, both parents deciding that they can't have more than one child or two children at most. That's not enough to replace the population. And the state, it's also partly to do with the way the state behaves, because the state is taking over the function of parents. You know, for example, if you were to have a child at the age of 9 months, that child would qualify for state-sponsored child care. And so you would be incentivized as a mother to put your 9-month-old baby into childcare so you can
I know
go to
people
work.
that have done that.
And it would be much better to actually give your spouse a tax break, so that, because he had a child, so that you could stay at home, and instead of handing over your child to the state to look after, you brought up your own child. And so that, apart from anything else, your child wasn't then indoctrinated by the state, and you could have a strong family unit. You know, at the heart of our community is the family unit. So we do need, it's a bit of a joke to call it Bong for Britain, but we do need a policy which reinstitutes the incentive and the ability to have children and to have families, which are the cornerstone of society, and society is the cornerstone of our nation state.
But you can't do that if housing is unaffordable and you need two people working to pay off the rent and pay off the mortgage. Have you ever watched The Simpsons?
Not for a while.
You know, you are familiar with The Simpsons.
Yeah,
Homer Simpson is now looked at as aspirational. He's 38. His wife is a stay-at-home mother. He's got a house. He's got 3 kids, 2 cars, and he can pay for it all. Yeah. Now, that wasn't weird in the 80s and 90s. No. That was doable. Now, people, Gen Z, they're looking at this going, how does he afford all this? He works in a power plant as an engineer. How can he afford a house? How can his wife afford to stay at home and look after the kids? They're looking at this like, this is crazy. How did people manage to do that? Yeah. Just The Simpsons hasn't caught up. I mean, now she would be working, what's her name, Marge or something. She'd be working, a whole shift just to pay off the mortgage. You cannot bonk for Britain, bonk as much as you like. People do want to have more children. They just can't afford it. Well, and I still put it down to mass immigration because that's what's fueling the housing market.
The policies so it's a policy for bonk for Britain, which involves policies which will make it possible to afford to have children and to bring them up yourself in a family. That's the key.
But do that while sending people back. You have to do it both.
So the key thing when it comes to policy making, you've got to look at all your policies in the round and how they affect each other.
Sort out immigration, you sort out nearly everything. I keep coming back to that.
Yeah, but to sort out immigration...
That's the first thing you need to do, then bonk for Britain.
To sort out immigration, there are a number of things that need to take place. For example, you would need to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. That will entail a scrap with the EU. That will entail a requirement to deregulate, cut taxes on British businesses so that we can have a scrap with the EU. And that's why, so in order to cut immigration, we have to be ready.
Get it down to zero.
No, in order to cut immigration, we have to be ready for a multitude of different things that are going to affect this country.
Good.
And that's why we must have a holistic, coherent approach to policy making. And that's why Advance UK is necessary, because it will do all the deep thinking that's needed to make sure that we don't target one silly thing and then miss all the consequences of what we're doing. For example, if the ECHR is to be removed from this country, it has to be removed from Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It has to be right across the country.
Yes. Okay. Right. Well, that's all my questions asked. Thank you very much, Ben Habib, for joining us at UK Now today.
Thank you very much for having me on.